One of the nice things about our life, Davies and mine, is that we get to go all around the world, and everywhere we get to hear different choirs singing this music or people chanting the chants that we do. We were in Croatia, and the first thing they wanted to do was chant the chants that we all know in English, but they wanted to do them in Croatian. And the same in Russia, they wanted to do them in Russian, and so on, all around the world. But the natural love of the heart wants to express itself in music. And so these choirs and the beautiful, beautiful music that Swami Kriyananda wrote to express the upward moving energy, it's a great joy to travel around and hear it expressed. And the choir here is a beautiful choir, so thank you. Wonderful musicians. So tonight, Devi and I are going to talk about Kriya Yoga as a gateway to self-realization. And most of you in the room know about Kriya. Many of you practice Kriya. But just very briefly, Kriya is a technique of meditation. It's a technique to consciously move energy up and down or revolving around the spine, the subtle spine, and through a breathing technique. And that movement of energy around the spine is actually the central, one could say the central technique for achieving self-realization. Self-realization, these beautiful sayings up here on the wall are from Yogananda's poem, Samadhi. And Samadhi is the state of self-realization, where we actually have the experience in our own consciousness of not mentally, but the experience of shifting who we think we are. Right now, if I were to ask, who are you? Well, you're wily now, and you've been prompted, but if I had a naive audience, they would give me an answer like, well, I'm a man or a woman, my name is such and such, I work, I came from India, I came from Czechoslovakia, whatever. Kriyananda said, Swami Kriyananda, our teacher, said that the ego is like a bundle of self-definitions. So if I asked who you were, and you were a naive enough audience, you would start describing that bundle of self-definitions. But that's not who we are. And it's who the ego or our soul identified with the body, that's the kind of disguise or the role that we take on, the miasma that we take on. But at some point, we are going to awaken from those bundle of self-definitions, because imagine, I don't know, that we have a complex bundle, a couple of hundred self-definitions, and it might seem like we do a lot of things, we are a lot of things, we have done and become a lot of things, but that bundle of 200 is just 200 out of an infinite number of possibilities. And so however complex that bundle is, it's still not our true self. Self-realization is when we dump that bundle, which are really limitations to our consciousness. We dump that bundle, and then we become everything. And that's what this great poem, Samadhi, talks about in some of the clearest language to explain, or at least impart, this mystical realization that awaits all of us. So if we aren't who we seem to be, then there's a spiritual journey that we have. And we're all on that spiritual journey. Everybody in the world is on a spiritual journey. Some of us as consciously as we can be, and some not so consciously. But Yogananda, his first book he published it in this country, but his first book and his first lecture was The Science of Religion. And he said that everyone is motivated by the same motivation, everybody in the world, the same motivation. the desire to be happy and to avoid pain. Now, we're not going to talk much about that tonight because we're going to talk about it tomorrow night. That's the subject of a talk tomorrow night, and I hope you'll all be there. At any rate, so we're going to leave you hanging about how to achieve happiness till tomorrow night. But coming back to Kriya Yoga, so if this is our destiny, then obviously the question that arises for anyone who's intelligent and sincere is, if that's my destiny, how do I get there? And so religion doesn't really answer that. Religion is a set of beliefs or a set of practices, or we can look at the altar here. The altar is relatively typical of altars in whatever religion people go to. Could be Buddhist, could be Christian, could be Hindu, could be Islam, could be any of them. And altars look somewhat similar. Generally, they'll have candles on them, they have light of some kind. They may or may not have icons on them. But all of these are outer symbols of inner realities. Why are there lights on the altar? Why in India do you start a ceremony or talk with bringing out a lamp and ceremoniously lighting those wicks for that lamp? It's because when we begin to meditate, when we begin to calm the mind and calm the restless emotions of the heart, one of the experiences that we have is that we see light. We see light at the forehead. And when that light grows strong enough to consume a person's consciousness, then we call that person enlightened. And so these universal truths are there. And so Kriya Yoga is, one might say, a method of exploring the universe to find these universal truths. Now, in the autobiography of a yogi, so a little bit historically, Kriya, in the autobiography of a yogi, Yogananda said that for many, many centuries, Kriya has existed because it's very central. The real altar is not the altar there. The real altar is our own consciousness and our own central nervous system. That's the altar on which we really worship. And so Yogananda said that Kriya, or a technique like Kriya, has existed for as long as there have been enlightened seekers. He said, for instance, Jesus and his disciples practiced Kriya, or a technique very similar to it. And then he said further that as the Dark Ages came, mankind, the planet as a whole, went through an age where there was not very much enlightenment. These subtle teachings had to go into hiding. And so he said, through man's ignorance and priestly secrecy, the technique of Kriya was lost to mankind. And then a little over 150 years ago, Babaji, who is not only on our altar, but on one of the great avatars that is considered to be a teacher of mankind, he re-released the practice of Kriya, the technique of Kriya, back into the world. And then Yogananda brought that technique to America in the 1920s. And from here, it is spreading around the world, has spread around the world. And now there are millions and millions of people practicing Kriya, whereas 200 years ago, there were virtually none, or a few sadhus up in caves in India. But so the spread of this technique has gone around the world. Yogananda quotes his teacher in the autobiography of a yogi, his Sanskrit teacher, quotes him as saying that Kriya is the most effective technique for self-realization through man's effort ever given to mankind. And so this central technique Now, that's more than just a statement of our church is better than your church. Our beliefs are better than your beliefs. So it is a statement of the reality that if we don't work outwardly with symbols or semi-outwardly with rituals or ritualized prayer or those kinds of activities, all of which help uplift consciousness, but they aren't central yet. Central to us is our own nervous system and our own, not just physical nervous system, but subtle nervous system. I'll come to that. But working directly with the energies in the nervous system, if we can begin to gain control of that, and if we can take that energy and lift it up to the point where we'll become enlightened, then we become enlightened. Now, these are universal teachings. They don't have anything to do with religion. There are Kriya bonds in all different religions. As far as I know, there's probably Kriya bonds in every religion, that certainly all the major religions. So it isn't a religion. It isn't something that is particular to any group of people, any race or nation or culture. These are universal realities. You know, if a doctor is going to perform a heart operation and the patient is on the table, the doctor does not pause to look at the chart to see whether that patient is a Muslim or a Buddhist or a Christian. The heart, the body is the same. And these exterior definitions, these bundles of self-definitions that we take on, are only on the surface, and they aren't universal. So the Kriya technique is a universal technique because it works with us as we have been created, as we have been produced. When we begin life as a single cell, that cell is at the medulla. And then that cellular structure begins to grow, and the energy goes down the spine, the spinal cord and the brain begin to develop, the body develops outwardly from that. These are universal realities, and they don't have to do with anything that's outside. So Kriya works with these universal realities. But I have some bad news for you. Reality is not really real. At least the reality with which we relate to things is not really real. Because the reality that we have, the reality with which we relate to the world, is dependent on our senses. And our senses are set up in such a way that they only see a tiny portion of what's really there. So our sight only sees a little bit of the spectrum. We have machines that can show us X-rays and infrared rays and other aspects that extend the senses, but even they only give us a little bit of a glimpse of reality. And so most of what we just assume to be real, our bodies are solid, the floor is solid, the chair is solid, is not true at all. On a deeper level, where we can't perceive with our senses, on an atomic level, we're basically entirely space. It's all dealing with energy, but if you think of the atom, and the atom does not look like that little picture with the, the lines around it that we all saw in the science books growing up. But there's a nucleus of energy, and if you think of that nucleus as roughly the size of a basketball or a beach ball, the electrons, the field of electrons around it, are like as far away as in a football stadium. They're at the end of the football stadium, and they're whizzing around so fast that it makes it look solid, but everything is space in between that. And so we're basically completely composed of space, except for a little bit of what seems to be matter, but it isn't even matter. It's energy in a different form. Now, our senses are not going to tell us that, but gradually as we extend the senses and we try to investigate the world, practical world, material world around us, we begin to understand that the outward surface reality that we see and feel and hear is not the ultimate reality. Then when you get down on even deeper levels, the universe really gets wiggly. And I don't pretend to understand, even begin to understand quantum physics. But when you get down to the kind of level where you're just in between kind of outer material reality that we can see and feel and touch, even by extension, down to quantum energies, the energy, it gets very bizarre. You know, IBM, they're working on quantum computers because they can be much, much more powerful. And IBM just announced that they were starting up, businesses can sign up now for IBM's future quantum computing services. But at a quantum level, things both are and are not. There's a famous example, Schrodinger's cat, where imagine a box, and in that box is a cat. Now, you don't know whether that cat is alive or dead. In the outer world that we think of, that cat is either alive or dead. But in the quantum world, that cat is both alive and dead at the same time, and you won't know which it is until you observe it, and then you freeze it into one of those states. Well, that is just an example, but you know, you can't do that with cats. But quantum particles, they function in that same way. They're both one state and another state that seem contradictory at one and the same time. Not only that, but they get entangled with each other. Every week, new things come out. They get two quantum bits get entangled, so you can have a quantum bit here and a quantum bit on Mars or in another galaxy. If they're entangled, if one of them shifts its spin, the other does also immediately, without any time space. Scientists don't understand. And they just found out that we think up until now, well, they got entangled because they got together and did a little kind of tango together, and I don't know, an engagement, and then they were entangled. But no, they can get entangled from separation, and then they don't even think that causality functions in the same way. So if I were to read a book, somebody would have to have written that book before I could read it, right? At least on our level, in the quantum world, that isn't necessarily true. That causality. Anyway, I don't begin to understand it. I don't even understand how IBM can get all those itty-bitty little cats to behave themselves inside that computer. And but what I am saying is that the universe of reality that we think that we understand is not ultimately what's going on. And so how do we find out what's going on? Well, we can't find it with instruments except the instrument of consciousness. And so the instrument of consciousness, not our mind, not our emotions necessarily, but the consciousness of intuition, that which will bring us into this state of self-realization, is the instrument of experimentation. And so these arts have been taught and practiced in India for a long time, not only India, but India is the best example because in India it has been taught and passed down from teacher or guru to disciple to disciple to disciple. And they've been brought out in the open, and they have been consciously passed down and explored. In the West, that's not true. That people still have these samadhi experiences, they call them ecstasy, but if you have an ecstasy experience, there's nobody that you can talk to about it. Or if you can talk to anyone about it, they don't want it to be known. Many of you have heard of the great Catholic saint Padre Pio. Many, many miracles, a marvelous, marvelous soul. But we had a friend who was a Kriya, practiced Kriya, but in Italy was also a Catholic, and he went to Padre Pio to do confession. That was essentially the way Padre Pio counseled people, was that way. And so this man kind of quietly said to Padre Pio, you know, I meditate and I practice a technique called Kriya. And Padre Pio said, shh, don't talk about that, but you're doing the right thing. And so in the West, there's not a tradition where we can talk about it. There's not a tradition where these teachings have been consciously passed down. That is, until the incoming energy from the East, there's a marriage going on in our time between East and West. And Yogananda said that this is necessary, this marriage between Western material efficiency and Eastern spiritual, mystical efficiency. Those two need to come together now. And by coming together, both cultures will be stronger and more uplifted. In fact, he said, there are many American souls being born in India, which is why when we travel to India, we see all kinds of malls and jeans everywhere. We're the only people in India that dress like this. It's not quite true, but everybody else is in jeans and T-shirts, and we're going around kind of in semi-ancient Indian clothing, and they respect it, probably think we're a little strange, but so he said many American souls are being born in India, and many Indian souls being born in America to bring about this coming together. Okay, so if that's happening, and if reality on a kind of outer level that we accept as reality, if that isn't ultimately what's going on, then how in the world do we find out what's going on? The experiment and the study of it, the exploration of it, has to take place for every one of us. Every one of us has to go through that experiment, but we can't do it with microscopes and oscilloscopes and other scopes. We have to do it with our consciousness. But how do we do it with our consciousness if the consciousness that we're working with is already caught up, already died into the delusion of unreality? So the science of meditation is basically to calm the mind and calm the heart, the emotional likes and dislikes and the feelings, to calm the mental process and the feeling process sufficiently so that we can see clearly into our own self, where we'll find not candles on an altar, but lights on the altar of our own nervous system, which is the true church. The true altar is our own nervous system. And so the techniques of meditation help us to control energy, one would say, on the pre-quantum level. And so quantum seems to me, at the early stage of exploring it, to be kind of in between solid matter and energy. Well, what the yogis say is that all matter, Einstein says it too, all matter is basically energy. And so we want to get past the solid level into the energetic level. But then the yogis go a step further and say even that energy is not ultimately it, because underlying that energy is consciousness. And so if we want to understand ourselves and understand reality and get to this state of self-realization, we have to get past the senses, past even the energy in electromagnetic energy is what Yogananda called animal energy on the animal level. We have to get past that into subtle energies. Well, those subtle energies aren't something that we can see and feel and touch. So in order to carry on the exploration of those, we need techniques of consciousness. And that's what Kriya is. It is a technique whereby we consciously work with that subtle energy, moving it up and down or around the spine. And we work with it and bring it under the control of our will. And when we have complete control of that, we might think, well, what's the use of that? That isn't very practical. But it's extremely practical. Those of you who've read, or if you do read the autobiography, there are dozens and dozens and dozens of stories of miracles in there. Lots and lots of stories of miracle, because once you're in control, once you understand how to control that subtle energy that's, as I say, beneath the physical energy world and into the, one might say, the universe where thought or consciousness and energy function together, then with your consciousness, you can rearrange that energy and you can do things that we can't even dream of doing until we're at that level. So in the autobiography, Yogananda talks about people having two bodies, Lahiri Mahashaya appearing in two bodies at the same time, levitating. You know, in this world, if you want to build a house, you get a contractor and have them get the bricks and mortar and all the materials, and they put that together. If you wanted to build a palace, you'd do the same thing. And if you wanted to have that palace full of gold and gems, you'd have to go out and buy all of those things. And it seems kind of laborious. Well, when you have control over these subtle energies, as Babaji did, he just manifests a golden palace. Or they manifest a body. There isn't such a thing as life and death or material and non-material. At that level, consciousness and outer reality function together. And so miracles happen, miracles for them, from those who can do them. They aren't miracles at all. They're no more a miracle than us turning on a television set. You know, that's a miracle. We don't understand that. They do understand it. They manifest the television set before they turn it on. Actually, I don't think they watch television, so they have other better entertainment. Nonetheless, they are in control of those energies, but why, if you're in control of those energies, do you want to muck around in the physical level? If you can manifest a golden palace and manifest gems and diamonds and jewels, why do you want to go to a jewelry store to get those things? Or why would you even have that desire to do it? You don't. It just falls away. At that level, what you're after isn't on the physical level. It's on the level of consciousness. And what you're after is not contained in any kind of a bundle of self-definitions. It is expanded completely until you, in your own consciousness, drop all of those bundles and you become one with everything that is, everything that has been, everything that will be. Everything ultimately is produced out of consciousness, out of not our egoic consciousness, out of the Creator's consciousness, out of God's consciousness. Everything is produced out of that, including us. And the goal, ultimately, of life, since that's what's produced the world, the goal of life is to come back to that original state. And Kriya Yoga is the most powerful technique that we have in order to do that, because it works on our own inner systems of knowing. The physical spine, the physical brain. Do Kriya Yoga, your physical brain will change. Your physical spinal cord will change. But if you do these things, practice Kriya, what really happens is that your consciousness expands and you become one with everything.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank our incredible signer. We've been translated in many different languages, but this is the most beautiful, I must say. It's really a dance. Well, I want to carry on in this theme that Jyotish has started, and I thought it would be fun to use an example from popular culture. And several years ago, a very interesting science fiction movie came out called The Matrix. And in The Matrix, there were some very interesting points about consciousness that were made. I won't go into the details. Perhaps many of you have seen it, maybe not all of you. But the basic plot line is it's in the future when computers have taken over, have prevailed in a war against humanity, and they've enslaved humanity, and they've created this matrix, this illusionary world that people think they are living in, when in reality, the human beings are enslaved in these little cells, teeny little cocoon-like things, and they're being used, their life force is being used as batteries to power these big computers, so reversed. But these little human beings are, while they're just in these little cocoon-like shells, they're having all these images come to them of a whole life, of a whole society, a whole culture, none of which exists. So that's the first point that's interesting. But then there's a small group of rebels, we'll call them the yogis. And they start waking up and they say, wait a minute, something doesn't feel right. You know, we were doing a radio interview the other day, and the interviewer was a very lovely woman she lives in Dallas, and she was asking how we got on the spiritual path. And I said, you know, from when I was a little girl, I always felt I was an observer. I never felt this was my place to be. I was watching my parents, watch my friends, watch my relatives, and so forth. And I thought, why do they do all this? They're running around like chickens with their heads cut off. But for what purpose? I never got it. And people would ask me, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would say, happy. And anyway, that was really the beginning for me of trying to feel, this doesn't feel right. So our characters in the Matrix, some of them, the yogis, started thinking, this doesn't feel right. And they were able to get out of their little cocoons. And then they gathered together on a spaceship. But they had this wonderful opportunity, which made me very envious. Because they still had these sort of portals where they were plugged into the computer, they could plug them into the mainframe, and like in 15 seconds, they could learn the whole science of martial arts. Or in 15 seconds, they could learn how to fly a helicopter. Whatever they needed to know, it could just be immediately programmed into them. And then finally, the last point, which reflects on the science of Kriya Yoga, believe it or not, is that finally one of them, they know that someone's going to come that's going to free them. He's going to be the chosen one. And he is able, with the power of his mind, to return the tables on this main computer, this matrix, that has been hypnotized and controlling all of humanity. And there's this fabulous scene where everyone else has been running away from these kind of embodiments of the Matrix. And the hero, Neo, he turns on them, and he just enters into one and explodes it. Well, these three principles, let's call them, are actually part of the yogic journey. First of all, we have to feel, wait a minute, something's not right. This world, it seems so real, people seem so busy, so engaged, but what are they really doing? What difference does any of it make if you make $1 million or $700 million or whatever? What difference does any of it make? And then you start realizing, you know, I don't think I'm even beginning to tap my own potential. I remember as a child, I could absorb things flawlessly and permanently, and I'm seeming to lose that ability. I feel like there's so much more of my consciousness that I'm not using. And then finally, and this again comes to the science of Kriya Yoga, we get to the point where we say, I want to break out. I want freedom. I want to see truth. I want to see reality. And I want to help other people to do that too. And that, in a nutshell, is why the great masters brought us Kriya Yoga. And the little science fiction movie, The Matrix, captures it. Now, in Swami Kriyananda's remarkable treatise, The Art and Science of Kriya Yoga, he devotes 2 chapters to what he calls, and I know most of you have studied it, so I'm not going to go in detail. If you haven't studied it, come here to the Ananda Church and learn more about it. I don't think there's a better, simpler, clearer, deeper exposition of the philosophy and practices of yoga that exists in the West. But Swami devotes 2 chapters to what he calls the anatomy of yoga. And it's just what we've been talking about, that yes, we have a physical body, but we also have an energy body. We can call it an astral body. Some people can see the auras or the astral bodies. You know, when they do Kirlian photography, what they're showing is the astral body, and it's beautiful. I don't know if any of you get we have a weekly blog called Touch of Light. And recently, one of the images we used was a man who does photography where he uses different kind of light to show, and he photographs flowers. And they just look like the most beautiful things you've ever seen. Whole different color range, whole different images. And so we have an energy body. But the source of that energy body, and Jyotish was talking about this, is our astral spine or our subtle spine. And along the subtle spine are different centers or chakras, and you've probably all had classes on this, so I'm not going into it in detail. But for our discussion this evening, let's just say that the more we withdraw the energy from the periphery and the more we center it in these chakras, and then the more we raise up, because the lower chakras are centers of more materialistic concerns, the upper chakras are centers of more spiritual consciousness. So Kriya is a remarkable aid in this process, in our journey. And let's use this word aid, A-I-D. I had fun with thinking about this. A, first letter of aid, because we become aware of the energy in our spine. Master said, Yogananda said, the reason most people do not advance spiritually is their spines are spiritually paralyzed. So we know what it is if somebody's physical spine is paralyzed, they can't move. If your energy spine is paralyzed, astral spine, there's no movement of energy. And so Kriya helps us, one, to be aware, A, first letter of aid, aware that there is energy. And with a little practice of Kriya, you start realizing, how long has this been going on? There really is energy in my spine. I can feel it. And the second letter of aid is I. as we concentrate and focus our energy and withdraw them from the senses, that flow of energy increases. And we can feel it more and more intently. And the third letter of aid is D, the direction. Awareness of energy, increase of energy, direction of energy. It flows upward. And that heightened, increased energy in our chakras, ultimately at the spiritual eye, it helps us, just like the character in Matrix. We start to realize our own potential. Ideas become clearer. We understand how to accomplish things, how to go about something. We have a woman who moved to Ananda village in the last few years, and she's a genius of financial visioning. And we've been going around, running Ananda for nearly 50 years, and different little systems, financial systems. This woman came, and in a couple of weeks, she just observed, and she put it together in a whole other way. And we're having a hard time understanding what she's doing, but we're running as fast as we can behind her because we realize she's working on a higher level than any of us were working on. And so bringing this aware, increased, directionally flowing energy to the higher centers, we begin like Neo in Matrix to realize I can do a lot more than I thought I could do. And, we have people, I'm sorry, I hope I don't embarrass you, Heidi, but we have many wonderful teachers here, and Heidi is a yoga teacher. I bet if someone told you 10 years ago, you're going to be teaching yoga and training other people to teach yoga, you would have said, you got the wrong person. But it's true of all of us. Once we begin practicing Kriya, it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't think this was possible. I didn't think I could do this. And Swami Kriyananda tells so many wonderful stories. He said, he was a wonderful composer and an author, a poet. And he said, I love the poetry of Shakespeare and Shakespeare's sonnets. But I never heard music that went with them. So he said, I never studied music. I never even heard Elizabethan compositions, musical compositions. But I tuned into Shakespeare and the melodies just came. That's a consciousness that is running at its full potential. And Kriya Yoga, and it's wonderful. Kriyananda was our founder, our teacher for our whole adult life. He chose that name because what he was able to accomplish in one life, 400 pieces of music, 200 books, thousands of lectures in 7 different languages, communities all over the world. How did he do that? He wasn't able to plug into the mainframe of the computer, but he plugged into another mainframe, and that's the divine flow of energy. And that's what Kriya Yoga does for us. It helps us to begin activating the higher centers. And, the science of neurology right now, where they're really studying the evolution of the brain, they're seeing remarkable changes in people's brains with practice of meditation. I don't think yet a study has been done on Kriya Yogis, but I would love to see that done sometime, because it's for those of you who don't have Kriya, keep going as far as you can till you get it. Maybe you can't say, oh, maybe that's a little too far for me. Take the next step. Then take the next step. You won't regret it. It will change your life. It will change your health. We have a medical doctor in the community, and he said Kriya Yogis are from 10 to 15 years younger biologically than the average population. And it's because of that increased, intensified, uplifted energy. So when we begin to be interested in Kriya, the gateway to self-realization, there's one very important component, because otherwise it can just become mechanical. And that's, we need to understand that there's a divine play going on in the world right now. doesn't seem very pretty right now. In fact, it seems kind of scary to me right now, and I think to a lot of other people. But remember, humanity is evolving, and at this point in time. And part of that evolution is this science of Kriya Yoga. Why was it given right now? Why wasn't it 1,000 years from now? Or 500 years in the past? It was given now because the need is now. Because people, we, not people, you, me, Palo Alto, California, United States, Britain, everywhere, people need a tool to break through the hypnosis of Maya. We're not going to get the reality from the newspapers and the media. We've got to feel it within ourselves. We have to break through this miasma, the matrix that says, you see bumper stickers that say, he who has the most toys wins. Well, I say he who has the most joy wins. Because that's why we have Kriya Yoga now. It's not just for us to sit in our little meditation rooms or come together with in our churches. It's to be a dynamic force for cultural transformation. And each one of us need to appreciate the fact, if we never teach, if we never tell anyone that we do yoga and Kriya Yoga, it doesn't matter. We are living in a flow of upraised energy, and it affects everyone around us. Every April, for the month of April at Ananda Village, we have a beautiful display of tulips. We plant between 15 and 18,000 tulips every year. And we dig them up in the fall because they don't bloom true every year. And it's a glorious thing, and it's open to the public, these beautiful gardens. Last year we had 8,000 people visiting us from all over California. But I was looking at the news the other day on the internet, and there was this headline and that headline: corruption, scandal, secrecy, no integrity, divisiveness, and I was, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. And then finally, my Google News page is personalized, and the very last little, locally for Nevada County where Ananda Village is, the last little news item was, Tulip Festival at Ananda Village. And I thought, wonderful. Somehow this is getting out there. And so for us, really, I want you to leave tonight understanding Kriya isn't something esoteric. It's not something you do in the privacy of your little meditation room. Kriya Yoga is the antidote to the problems that the world is going through right now. And we are part of the cure. Those of us who practice Kriya Yoga, who live it, who live in a state of uplifted awareness and higher energy, we have a responsibility now to, Christ said in the Bible, don't hide your light under a bushel, but let it so shine forth that it does glory unto our Father who art in heaven. We need to let the light of Kriya Yoga shine now, every one of us. Maybe not with words, but with our soul. And we need to touch everyone we meet, the downtrodden, the fearful, the sorrowful, the confused, the depressed, the dying, the impoverished, the disempowered. We need to touch them with the light of Kriya Yoga, because this is why the masters have come to the world at this time. And it is why we have been drawn to these teachings at this time. So we join hands with you in this great movement of human evolution that Kriya Yoga represents. Thank you.
Inside
Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, beloved God, Great Masters, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswarji, beloved Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, humbly we bow to you all. O Divine Spirit, awaken us to the power and truth of our own being. May we see thy face, thy love and joy, shining through all the clouds of sadness. And may we know there is only one reality. It is your joy. Om. Peace. Amen. Thank you all for coming. And we also want to take a moment to thank the choir for both tonight and tomorrow night, and all of you who have put in a lot of time to make this weekend so ample. So thank you all. It's a joy for us to be with you.
Thank you. If you'd like to talk tonight, just wait till you hear what Devi has to say tomorrow night. Thank you.